Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have part 6 of what I've titled Bioweapon Blues, assessing the deaths and disability from the toxic jabs. Some astonishing information. This is actually just 2 days after my last part of the series, part 5, but there's a lot more information that's coming out. Very important. And some of these statistics are horrific. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see 20 million dead from the jab so far. And they're saying billion injured, not millions. So huge numbers. I have to go back and verify that. But this guy here, this doctor, I think he's from Canada, is not some random man on the street, somebody who is informed. But we're going to watch some videos, see some slides, and just kind of go through this. I think these updates are very important. Something very important happened in Europe where somebody from Pfizer said they didn't even test the efficacy on the public before putting out the original jab. So there's just huge amounts of negligence, huge crimes. There were massive, and then it happened worldwide. I mentioned it in my earlier talks about how many of the shots were ordered by these governments, and then the use is so low. So it's clearly some form of massive grift, fraud going on in all these countries. And so this misuse of funds is in the billions. And it's a disaster. It's a financial disaster, and it's a regulatory disaster, political disaster. I think the consequences will be massive once the public figures it out. If you get your information from the TV, you probably have no clue about what's really going on. But I'll play this video, and it just plays a few videos. And this also streams on Rockfin. I will take this off of YouTube. Best place to listen to my show is on any podcast because I have other audio. People who've interviewed me, and Rockfin will probably be the center of all my streaming in the future. I will be off of YouTube.
One of the big pieces of news over the last couple of days has been a Substack by a gentleman called Peter Halligan. Peter Halligan has been looking, he's a most experienced analyst, in financial industry, extremely used to looking at statistics and translating them into a summary statement. And this is the summary statement, and I hope your leaders are sitting down, holding themselves, because what I'm going to tell you intuitively sounds ridiculous. That's why it's so incredibly important that I say this. These numbers are best estimates at this point in time using government data for the global consequences of the clot shot in terms of death and morbidity, otherwise known as serious adverse events such as heart attack, strokes, pulmonary emboli, etc. We've been focusing for good reason on North American statistics during the last 2.5 years. But this man has extrapolated that into the total effect, negative effect, of the clot shot. And these are the numbers. Deaths, global deaths, directly attributable to the vaccine, 20 million.
So World War II total deaths rumored to be 66, 70 million, guesstimated, or best estimates around there. So we're still at the kind of rolling thunder. We're still going to come in. So
0 million deaths due to the clot shot, and 2 billion, big B, 2 billion serious adverse reactions of the type I described. Now, these numbers are beyond staggering. To contrast that with history, vaccines have typically been pulled from the market when the last one, the birth of the vaccine, was pulled with only 35 deaths. I hope people can appreciate the scale of what is going on here. An unimaginable carnage, which isn't over, because that number first of all, is the current estimate. It does not include future deaths of a similar type, which will be cumulative on top of that. It does not include stillbirths. It does not include those avoidable deaths due to having had a one-disease healthcare system for 2.5 years, with people not being treated or investigated for cancer or treated for cancer, for example. Those numbers are not included. The numbers from the lockdowns, the suicides, are not included. And also not included are the future deaths that we're anticipating from a rapid increase in the rate of cancer presentations and fatal infections because of immune suppression induced by the clot shot. Those factors are in addition to those jaw-dropping numbers that I just mentioned.
So this is Vigilant Fox. I'll put a link to him and the Hanrahan. I have some of the authors of that study in my slides, which will come up next. But I spoke in some of my earlier talks about the and I just talked about it earlier, about the over expenditure on some of these shots, clear fraud. Nobody's looking into it. I've never heard anything from the DOJ or anything like that. But this is what happened in Europe. This is one of the biggest frauds in Europe, according to this guy, Mislav Kolusik.
Predsjednica Europske komisije, znana kao 4,5 milijarde doza. Danas je nas 10 zastupnika u Europskom parlamentu postavilo.
So he says today 10 of the MPs asked the following question: when will she present to us as members of the European Parliament, as well as the EU citizens, whom she supposedly represents, the communication she had with Pfizer during the procurement of 4.5 billion doses at a time when there was absolutely no proof of the effectiveness, especially not of the harmfulness of that product. Imagine 4.5 billion doses for 450 million people. Great Britain is no longer with us, so there are quite a few of us. Based on that calculation, each child newly born will receive 10 doses of something that no one in the world, except maybe 2 or 3 people, knows what it contains. This is about secrets, protected patents. Don't think that any government or European agency knows exactly what is in that product. Nobody knows that, and nobody tells you that. They approve that pharmaceutical product just based on the statements of the pharmaceutical companies. They did not get to see any medical research. To date, no medical research has been handed over to the members of the EU Parliament's COVID Committee or the European Medical Agency, to anyone. How is that possible? We're talking about corruption here. The procurement of 4.5 billion products with the intention of injecting them into people without anyone knowing what's inside is surely the biggest corruption affair in the history of mankind, not only in the history of the EU. Well, what he doesn't say is that the same thing happened all over the world, in the US and Australia. So I mentioned Blaylock in the last talk, so I'm going to bring him up again here too. This is Russell Blaylock. He just talks about how viruses kind of can affect the system. Like he understands how there's like a cytokine storm and like a immune response that's super unhealthy in these children.
The statistical data was analyzed. What it demonstrated was that there was a remarkable difference between the health, the chronic health, and the acute health of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. This is based on abnormalities induced by the vaccine into the immune system. You had increased ear infections, you had increased asthma, increased pain. A number of these conditions just went down the list: eczema, gastrointestinal problems. And if you look at the graph, you see it's not a minor difference, it's a huge difference in the two groups. Vaccinated are having considerably more than the unvaccinated. The more vaccines that the child got, the higher the incidence of all of these disorders. If you overstimulate the immune system with these different powerful adjuvants, it can disrupt that developmental process. And so that would explain why we're seeing this list of 15, 20 immune-related diseases in the heavily vaccinated children. But with the vaccine, what you're doing is you're stimulating the immune system in a way that you never see with a natural infection. You're causing the immune system to be activated for years, even decades. The immune system is constantly being stimulated.
So it just, he kind of goes off into that, but it just shows how there's a correlation between these shots and stuff like that. And this is interesting too. This is an Altman statement from Australia. Let's see. This is a doctor out of Australia.
I am really, really excited to share this video with you guys. This guy, Philip M. Altman, is got a massive CV. He's a really impressive background in clinical trials, and he was asked by the Australian Medical Professional Society to address them. And oh man, listen to what this guy has to say. This is priceless.
The COVID gene-based vaccines have undoubtedly failed to live up to expectations. These so-called vaccines do not prevent infection. They do not prevent transmission of infection, and they are not keeping people out of hospital. These so-called vaccines are not safe. They have caused more deaths and serious adverse effects than any drug in the history of medicine.
Did you hear that? In the history of medicine, more damage has been caused by these drugs. In the history of medicine.
I mean, it's just incredible. This is one, like, I've actually been watching. This is just one of many videos that I've seen where a lot of these, not even just shots, but other things are being filled. Graphene oxide are being put in there. I could probably do a whole show on videos of this graphene oxide. Definitely has some kind of weird, what do you call it? Has some kind of weird magnetic aspect to it. But I've seen another video like this where somebody took a pill. I forgot what kind of pill it was. It's either like a psychiatric medicine, and they dissolved it in water and put a magnet up to it, and all the graphene oxide went to his side. It's really incredible. It's unbelievable. Let's see. A lot of these guys are, this is a guy I mentioned last time. I couldn't remember his name. Is Ladopo, and I talked about it the early ones. A lot of the proper inquiries are going to be done by the states, not by the federal government. But this Ladopo put out this whole thing where he found that young men have an 84% higher chance of getting a heart attack. And he was attacked by, this is him on Tucker, but he was attacked by the standard old line media. Really incredible that they would come out and try to discredit. This guy has a superb CV too, by the way. I think he went to Harvard. And he's got a great career.
So I ask people sometimes who are still, hemming and hawing about this, if this vaccine, if it had been known 2 years ago or so that this vaccine would increase cardiac deaths in young men by 84%, would they have approved it? The obvious answer is no. You would never give something to someone who was young and
right. Anyway, so they would never approve. They would never approve that with that. So they're still going forward with it. But this is another one. This is the interesting one where they asked the guy. This is a guy from the EU who asks somebody from Pfizer, "Did you test it?" And basically they said no. It's incredible.
Is a significant admission by Pfizer, is it not?
Yes, it is. I think it's the first time that that someone admitted this, and it was an important question. I asked this question also to AstraZeneca and Moderna, but they made a workaround and they didn't give me an answer. But Pfizer was very clear in speaking out, and I think it's important because of this narrative. You have to do it to protect your grandparents, and you do it for others. You do it for all of society. All the messages that was brought by all the governments here in the West. Because of that, the Corona Pass was introduced, and it had a significant impact on people's lives. There were people who were not able to work, who lost their job, people who lost their businesses, families were divided, and also friends. I think it's, and now it seems to be a disinformation from our governments.
Yeah. Well, if you just look at those governments, you'll remember that Monsieur Macron in France said he wanted to emmerder the unvaccinated, which is a rather rude word that approximates to the English. He wanted to really piss them off. If you look at Canada, for example, if you were unvaccinated, you were forbidden from getting on an aeroplane or a train. Some German states, you were forbidden from going to the supermarket to buy food to keep yourself alive. And it appears that this lady from Pfizer is now saying at the time they introduced this, they never had any evidence that it would stop transmission of the virus. So where did all these governments get the idea to tell us you can't go anywhere if you're unvaccinated?
All right, so this, I should have played this one first. This is her saying, they kind of miss a little piece of what she says here, but she says she's moving at the speed of science into the marketplace. That's the full statement she makes. So their science was based upon what the marketplace demands were, not the other way around.
Prime Minister and Health Minister told us, you don't get vaccinated just for yourself, but also for others. You do it for all of society. That's what I said. Today, this turned out to be complete nonsense. In a COVID hearing in the European Parliament, one of the Pfizer directors just admitted to me, at the time of introduction, the vaccine had never been tested on stopping the transmission of the virus. This removes the entire legal basis for the COVID passport. The COVID passport that led to massive institutional discrimination as people lost access to essential parts of society. I find this to be shocking, even criminal. Please watch the video until the end.
Voor u, mevrouw Small, heb ik de volgende vraag waar ik een duidelijk antwoord op wil. And I will speak in English so there are no misunderstandings. Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunization before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
Yeah, that's a very important statement. So she had to move at the speed of science to figure out what's going on in the market. So it was market influence, very important. Not what's best for the individual, not the medical thing, not really science. Science after the marketplace.
Stopping immunization before it's entered the market? No.
Standings. Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping humanization before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
It's really incredible. Just incredible. There's just so much other stuff that's popped up. It's just incredible. This is one of Borla. This guy's probably should be arrested for sure. Let's see. And we can go back through and say all those statements by, Fauci, the October 5th statement on the Night Show was one I did earlier. You got to go back and just watch that. Watch him just blatantly lie all the way through without any kind of contradiction from Goldberg. And then Walensky's still lying, and she's just posted. I should put this up today. She put something up, and she didn't have any positive response on Twitter. It was incredible.
A lot of indications right now that are telling us that there is a protection against transmission of the disease. There is no variant that we have identified that escapes the protection of our vaccine. COVID to come now with a treatment of 90% effectiveness, personally makes me very proud about.
It's funny, I remember looking back and people would re-quote this. It just shows the power of propaganda about the media, things like that. It's really something else.
And we know that the 2 doses of the vaccine offer very limited protection, if any. The 3 doses with a booster, they offer reasonable protection. It is necessary.
These guys give away little tells. They're not that great public speakers. This is kind of a little tell, kind of like Walensky.
Booster.
Kind of hard.
They offer reasonable protection. The 3 doses with a booster, they offer reasonable protection. It is necessary a 4th boost right now, but the protection that we are getting from the 3rd, it is good enough.
Yeah, they're changing the goalposts too. This is Malone. These guys broke Joe Rogan, Malone, and McCullough when they were on there. And now he's just kind of saying they're all being attacked.
There's something happening right now worldwide. There is
this is October 8th, 2022.
A lot of us have felt the force of a concerted effort to try to tear us apart. And to some extent, it's working. And it comes under the guise of these words like controlled opposition. There is an effort right now to destroy, as the truth is coming out, to destroy the integrity and cohesion of the resistance groups all across the world. And it is a powerful force that's hitting us in every channel they can. And I just plea with you, we need to keep all of us, there is no one leader. There is a diverse spectrum of decentralized leadership, which is what makes us strong. And do not let them put us in opposition with each other. We must stand together as community. That's the only way we're going to be able to resist, because what we've learned is that what we've just experienced over the last 3 years is just a tiny slice of what they're planning to do to us. And if we're gonna be able to succeed, we got to hang together, as Benjamin Franklin said, or we are certainly going to hang separately. Thanks.
Somebody did this funny one. This is Trudeau and Newsom, 2 WEF stooges, New World Order stooges. Just truly awful human beings. They'd overdub them together.
Just love him so much. Hey, I'm Justin Trudeau, and I'm so excited to be here because I'm in California with another lizard person. He's a lizard person just like me, and I'm here with him in California, which he's turned into a communist shithole, just like I'm trying to do to Canada. We're both World Economic Forum stooges, but we have really nice suits. Look at our suits. And look at his hair. I just love him so much. Oh, look at him. Look at you. I'm Gavin Newsom. Look at me. I smile when I'm talking. So people think I'm a nice guy, but actually I eat babies. Yes, I do.
Yeah. So anyway, it gets worse. But it's just incredible. There's so much. This is a really interesting. This is actually was done in 2021. This Gallagher is I think he still is a member of Congress and kind of was really trying to get a grip on what was going on with the furin side, whether this was made in a lab in China. And Eco Health Alliance, Peter Daszak, who I reported in my last video, got another $1 million from Fauci, which is totally crazy. I mean, and you see how these payoffs kind of act, or in my opinion, act as kind of payoffs, blackmail. You're still on the board. And that's kind of the way the system really works, the underground system of payoffs and things like that. This is a very long, but you can check it out. I'll try to put links to all of these things in there in my. This is September 23rd, 2021.
And we are about to go back down the Wuhan coronavirus rabbit hole. In recent days, an organization called Drastic Research published leaked documents about EcoHealth Alliance's dangerous gain-of-function research, this time in a proposal titled Diffuse. So what happened is in March of 2018, there was a proposal to the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, as it's known, in which Peter Daszak, the head of the EcoHealth Alliance, proposed collecting hundreds of bat coronavirus samples and then modifying them to test their ability to infect and replicate in human cells. Gain-of-function research. Now, we already know that Daszak's EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan Institute of Virology were modifying coronaviruses and their spike proteins to infect human cells under an earlier grant from Dr. Anthony Fauci's institute at NIH. But, and bear with me, because we're about to go full nerd, what we learned from this DARPA proposal is that Daszak wanted to go even further. He wanted to further modify poking out. And remember, it's the spike protein that is key to the coronavirus entering human cells. Now, if we zoom in on the spike protein itself, what we see is the furon cleavage site.
Some people have made this argument to me that there are no viruses. There's huge departments of virology, so there's huge industries around this whole virus concept. I don't know. I would really like to be disabused. If anybody has any information to really prove that viruses are a big myth, I would like to see it. But this is an example of the kind of 3D technology they're able to do. MRI scanning on these clumps of DNA.
Right in the middle of the spike protein. That's this little thing right here. Credit to the Wall Street Journal, who in turn are citing Jason McClellan at the University of Texas, Austin for this graphic. But this feature is basically perfectly placed to allow the coronavirus to cleave the human cell membrane and infect the cell. It's critical to it being infectious. This is just one of the characteristics of the virus that causes COVID-19, that made some of the scientists to look at the virus and say, hey, this looks like it could have come from a lab, because all of the known coronaviruses that are genetically similar to the one causing COVID-19, none of them have this particular characteristic of a furin cleavage site. So the virus would have had to get extremely lucky to naturally evolve in just the right way to have a furin cleavage site that is so well adapted to being able to infect human cells. And on the other hand, adding a furin cleavage site to a virus to increase its pathogenicity is a long-standing gain-of-function practice. In fact, as Dr. Stephen Quay has found, there are at least 11 published gain-of-function experiments that add a furin site to make a virus more effective, including some by Dr. Shizhen Li, the bat lady at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who's worked with Daszak in the past. Okay, so furin cleavage site, an indication that this may have been modified, genetically altered, et cetera. But back to the diffuse program that I mentioned at the beginning. DARPA gets this proposal from Daszak and does the right thing. DARPA rejected the proposal, citing in part concerns surrounding gain-of-function research. But the story doesn't end there. As Alina Chan, a COVID origins investigator, has noted, the detail Daszak uses in the proposal to describe how he would work on cleavage sites suggests that his team of researchers had already done preliminary work introducing cleavage sites into coronaviruses in a laboratory setting. But here's the real kicker. When COVID first emerged and the scientific community was all hands on deck analyzing the virus for ways to combat it, one of the things that stood out was the furin cleavage site. Again, for scientific experts, this feature right there was an obvious outlier compared to most related coronaviruses. So you have this strange new coronavirus with a unique and typically non-naturally occurring furin site wreaking havoc in Wuhan, China. And then you have Peter Daszak and 3 other American researchers who had just 2 years earlier put together a proposal to play with cleavage sites in bat coronaviruses in collaboration.
Right. So they're going to, this is all going to come out at the end of it. There's a couple books, Robert F. Kennedy and Hahn, who I mentioned, who I will mention in the slides that I have right here. So I'll try to put this in. This is a good one. COVID Mythbuster series. Really good articles. Poking holes in the brain-blood barrier. Is that such a good idea? Of course not. It's a terrible idea. Accidental IV injection is real. Ever heard of trend cough? Bodybuilders regularly suffer from adverse event. So that's COVID Mythbuster series. This is a letter to Congress, October 7th, 2022, from Congress, sorry. Honorable Lawrence Tabak, National Institutes of Health. This is about what they just were going to give money to, back to the same thing, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It's incredible. I'll just read a little bit of it. Like I said, this is 5 days ago. We write regarding the recent decision by the National Institutes of Health under Fauci to resume funding to the EcoHealth Alliance just mentioned over the next 5 years to conduct more dangerous experiments on coronaviruses collected from bats, beginning with an initial payment of $653,000 from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the NIAID, in 2022. This announcement is deeply concerning given EcoHealth's lengthy history of reporting failures in collaboration with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or WIV. As you may know, the WIV is a Chinese Communist Party laboratory and likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. Since 2017, the WIV is engaged in classified research with the Chinese military and has a history of safety concerns at their high containment laboratory. In August of 2021, the Director of National Intelligence determined in the COVID-19 origins assessment that one intelligence community element assesses with moderate confidence that the first human infection of SARS-CoV-2 most likely was a result of a laboratory-associated incident, probably involving experimentation, animal handling, or sampling by the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It is worth noting that the NIC and 4 other intel agencies assessed with low confidence that the pandemic had natural origins, meaning that it didn't come from nature. It was not zoonotic. While 3 other agencies could not reach a conclusion on either theory, the NIC agreed that a lab leak and natural origins were plausible scenarios for causing the pandemic. So that's just an interesting thing I came across. I mean, I could read the whole thing, but it's signed by both parties. You see, bipartisan. This is just another picture of injured on the wall. They're starting to put it out because the global media is controlled. The U.S. media is controlled by four corporations. It's basically 4 sphincters. It's a way to look at it. This is just some of the stuff I mentioned, I think in the last one or the one before, people kind of locking up and looking around. This is another thing. It says, frightening, he survived doing well. I witnessed in a 3 times cared friend. Brother-in-law found passed out at work. High troponin signs. He's also okay now. Still very concerning. This is Nene Leak's son Brent, 23, hospitalized after suffering heart attack and stroke. Robert F. Kennedy, despite reports that COVID-19 vaccines cause blood abnormalities, the American Red Cross and FDA continue to brush off concerns that the massive vaccine campaign may have contaminated the country's blood supply. And then I mentioned Ledopo. So now Christ, I think, who is a competitor in the governorship against DeSantis, calls Ledopo a quack. our quack Surgeon General Ladapo, is back with more misinformation. So it's really about whose information is correct. It's really who's in power. The other guy's got disinformation. It's incredible. You're really in the midst of a full-scale, top-of-the-line information warfare. Chris, when I'm governor, I'll appoint a Surgeon General who is in the partisan ideologue and who will provide sound medical advice. So I guess medical advice is partisan now. Like everything else, it's political. It should scare the living daylights out of everybody. This is a meme, says no one should have to cross this bridge. No one, for your job and money. Of course, I mean, you're being coerced. You don't have a free choice. Sorry. This is Paul Alexander. I mentioned him last time. You can look at his Substack. He's very prolific. He's writing a lot over there. I forgot where his background was. He was either like the head of New Zealand, some medical institution there, but it says Australia ran away from COVID gene vaccines after jailing anyone who did not take jabs. Reason is the data, 90% reported to have died with COVID-19 had 2 or more shots. 4 had 0 doses. And this is Thomas Massey, who's also doing work. There are actually some kind of members of Congress doing work. One is Massey. Another is Johnson, Senator Johnson. Ernest Ramirez says he was offered money from FEMA for his son's burial if he would just agree to say on paper that the cause of death was COVID instead of the COVID vax. He refused the money. Now he travels to tell his story so his son's death will not be in vain. That should scare the living daylights. Your government agencies, this guy is saying, just to kind of, plain Joe or whatever, is saying that they're bribing people. It's incredible. It's just incredible. Fudging all the data. It's super corrupt. It's beyond super corrupt. This is a really good article. And I kind of mentioned behavioral science in the past. And this is one article that goes into the fairly recent September 22nd, 2022. Title of it is The COVID-19 Concoction, a Recipe for Successful Psychological Operations. It really goes into detail about how they put it together to manipulate people. And I think it's really worth reading. I would take time out to go. And I'll put a link in the show notes so people can read it, because it really goes in. And I'll cover some of the stuff with McKinsey today and how far back they were using McKinsey to kind of make sure vaccine pliability took place. But this is a really good article, very well written. The author's name is Valerie Kyrie. And the website is researchgate.net. Well, you can find it on researchgate.net. But where did I find it? It's not here. I don't think it's really there. It's interesting. It's not popping up on my search browser. Let's try Google. Wow. I can't find it. Let's read some here. It's not online anymore. Abstract. When viewed as a war story, the COVID-19 narrative framed in corporate media urges citizens to be on a constant war footing and yet reveals symptoms of a much deeper and more widespread pathology whose roots can clearly be identified in the context of the emergence of corporate personhood. Contemporary life itself reveals the rise of a new technocratic corporate order and the ways in which its managers plan to govern the new medicalized global society through A, ongoing events of shock and awe, B, the identification of official enemies, quote, human, non-human, and conceptual, C, the sustained imposition of threat perception and incitement of fear, D, the use of mantras and smear campaigns against dissident views, E, the fascist enforcement of a rigid official reality, F, the incubation of intergroup thinking, as in us versus them, the opposite, G, the imposition of confusion and uncertainty, H, the repetition of key phrases and terms, and I, the offer of salvation or associated incentives by the state. This article analyzes the leading narrative as a concoction of the technocratic mind and offers a recipe for readers to follow in their efforts to be more aware of the manipulations unfolding everywhere in the public discourse. And the introduction one is Birth of a Monster. I can't even believe I can't even find this. A significant part of the problem in correctly assessing illness is accurately identifying its type. Stroke, for example, can look like vertigo or migraine. Heart attack can seem like angina pectoris. Pancreatic cancer can look like prolonged indigestion. Thyroid conditions can look like physical weakness or chronic fatigue. which sometimes may appear to be Lyme disease. Depression can sometimes appear as anxiety, PTSD, or bipolar disorder. Pathological greed can look like polio, monkeypox, Marburg, or some other pathogen. Will get attention. Correct diagnosis for physical and mental conditions and injuries can also be hampered by an inability or unwillingness to consider the social, economic, and political milieu within which maladies and disorders emerge in the first place. Habitual thoughts and behaviors that develop over time, which are rooted in value systems inculcated by dominant culture, can play crucial roles in the formation of disease. In cultures where citizens are socialized, for example, to pursue material gain in place of personal well-being or the preservation of basic rights, as well as bow to political demands without question, disease emerges. It's a really good article. I'll find the link. Can't believe I can't find it now. But the conclusions in the article go back to behavioral science and what people think. So it's uncritical conformity. We have described a concoction for the propagation of a new necessary illusion, namely the key myth supporting the manufactured genesis story of COVID-19 born into Chinese wet market in Wuhan in 2019, the claimed mortal threat to population centers around the world, the declared necessity of lockdowns of undetermined duration, the acceptance and use of an inappropriate diagnostic instrument for the threat, and the asserted efficacy of a corporate pharmaceutical intervention proven empirically to be both hazardous as well as, in some cases, lethal. Solomon Asch. We recall the work of Solomon Asch, who devised a set of experiments presented as, quote, vision tests, unquote, in order to determine how likely subjects would conform to a control group of individuals working for Asch, but pretending to choose 2 equal lines from a sample of 4 that were clearly unequal in length. Asch claimed to be presenting a test of visual perception, but was instead attempting to determine the extent to which test subjects would dismiss their own powers of visual acuity and give clearly false answers to the test in order to conform to the majority view of the in-group. The Solomon Asch approach is actually in play all the time. And I always kind of rail against these nighttime hosts, and that's just one big Solomon Asch. That's really them presenting this thing as the in-group, and a lot of these political parties obviously do the same thing. I think that the left is very unpopular, but they try to put themselves out as the in-group, but I actually think their authentic support among the populace is probably a third of the U.S. populace. And just grotesque mismanagement and bring us to the brink of nuclear war. It's very telling. So, really good article. I can't believe it's not even on these things. This is the end. 7.3. In summary, the cardinal signals that a psychological propaganda recipe is in play include 1. A traumatic or shocking instigating event. It's like 9/11, actually. 1. A traumatic or shocking instigating event. 2. Designation of an official enemy. 3. Chronic imposition of threat perception and incitement of fear and rage. 4. Deployment of two-word mantras and smears. 5. Enforcement of a rigid official reality. 6. Suppression, censorship, and smearing of dissent. 7. Encouragement of an intergroup, us versus them mentality. 8. Imposition of confusion and uncertainty. 9. Repetition of key phrases and terms. 10. Offer of salvation or associated incentives by the state. Bang. This is a really interesting. These guys are asking questions. It's Mark Girardeau and Matthew Crawford. And they did some interesting assessments. I think one of the problems that the medical establishment is having with these people who aren't feeling well, whether they say it's long COVID or people who have been hurt by the shot, is that they just don't understand the mechanism of what's happening in the body. And I think it's totally novel. I don't think it's probably studied in any medical school. So when you go into the doctor and say, I don't feel good, I have tinnitus, I feel dizzy, they just, these whole host of problems, the doctors have no idea what's going on, how you could have all of these difficulties and all these things. But this is really interesting. They presume that the immune system is really being done, and the endothelial wall, basically the inside of your cells, is being scraped off. There's no other way to put it. So the action, that's why they call it a kind of intravenous problem, this whole disease, whether it's caused by COVID or the shot. But it's that something happens within your veins that goes on. And there's other things, like before I even started doing all of these bioweapons blues streams or discussions, there's people finding things in people's bodies, these unknown forms. And I think what these guys are saying is that those forms are the detritus, the residue of the internal parts of your veins being scraped off. So what you should do next time somebody wants to give you a shot is go ask your doctor, is it a good idea to have this shot that has only been tested on 8 mice, and that there's evidence that the inner part of my vein will scrape off and create these kind of overt plaques that will clog my arteries? I would tell that to your doctor, ask him. And then reference these guys, Mark Girardeau, Giradort, and I can pull them up. I'll put a link in the show notes. But they did some interesting things too. What they did too, actually, were using some good brain power. They looked at islands with incidences of COVID, of this disease, and I think they correlated that this disease was only recorded after the shots took place. I'll pull that up and see if I can find that. Study.
And when I looked into it, I was like, well, hold on a second. They're having the Sinovac vaccine, which is a traditional attenuated virus vaccine. And I was like, okay, so something's different. It's not the mRNA. You know, everybody was saying it's the mRNA, and everybody, it wasn't. It could still be the spike. Spike could still be the cause, but it was not the mRNA per se. I read also, I mean, something that also...
yeah, that's right. If I could slow down and share that point with everyone. Mark and I, last year, when people were trying to figure out, you know, is there a way to show that the vaccines are causing death? Before Mark and I really started working together, we both did independent analyses that were very similar. Now, Mark's focused more specifically on island nations. And he looked at island nations and he saw that that after vaccine uptake, that their cases of COVID began to explode, and measured a number of attributable deaths per million doses, or per million people, per million doses, based on those numbers. And it came out to be almost exactly, and I had some overlap, a pretty solid overlap with those nations, but I was going with nations that didn't previously have a COVID problem, and for whatever reason, maybe that nation is almost geographically, functionally like an island, perhaps in some regards. But you know, one way or another, our numbers were almost identical.
Yeah.
Almost identical, and I think this makes sense. You're just not going to have, you know, you're definitely not going to have large outbreaks of respiratory illness in the same way on, you know, tropical islands, you know, places that just aren't, just climates that aren't suitable for that particular form of illness.
Yeah.
Right. So I think what they're saying there is that the COVID reporting is correlated to the shot. And then there's, I mean, they go into a long talk about the endothelial effects of what's going on. So I'll put a link to that, and that's on Rumble. So I think it's kind of censorship free. This goes back to that earlier article that I said, Halligan, and I'll show Halligan's work. Peter's the most experienced analyst in the financial industry. He's very skilled at looking at and translating statistics into a summary statement. So this is how Peter came to that 20 million number. And Dr. Roger Hodgkinson, that was the guy's name on the first video I showed. And the Vigilant Fox, I'll put a link there. He's doing great work. And then they're planning on injecting Australian cattle with MNRA. And they did it, and 35 of the 200 died immediately. The rest will poison the food supply. So that's Peter Halligan, October 7th. The show notes on the podcast should just be underneath. So I'll try to put them in there. If you go to the podcast, you should be able to just kind of scroll under the information, the initial heading, and see what kind of links I put in there, whether it's links to my earlier discussions or interviews or the work I've done. I try to give people proper credit for their work. I mean, this is none of my work. I'm just kind of aggregating information, but I try to give people credit for it, mention their names. This is Peter Halligan. Has the UK government falsified the number of vaccinated? Global taxpayers on the hook for $120 billion of obsolete doses. Wow, it's off the charts. I mean, it's even the UK. So they had the EU, the UK, which is no longer part of the EU, the US, and Australia. How do you have that uniformity in lousy public health application? They all did it. They all overbought. It's off the charts. It's just a huge abuse. With those billions of dollars, I mean, it's like, where's that going? Who made that money? Where's it getting transferred to? I heard the wealth transfer. I mean, there's been massive wealth transfers in the United States to Congress, but wealth transfer for COVID was in $500 billion. So money that was spent on vaccines, propaganda, all kinds of stuff is off the charts. CARES Act. It's incredible. This is an incredible event. It's World War III event. Off the charts. People need to wake up. Stop watching their TV. This is a young girl I talked about last week. It's a picture of her 20. Dead after one day. Long COVID kids, New Zealand. Long COVID in their own words. My heart is beeping funny. 3-year-old kid. Nice. Dr. Asim Malhotra, moving at the speed of fraud. And these are just statements of people who are sick. My friend had so many tiny blood clots in her lungs after a booster. She's been sick for 10 months. Also, her heart is damaged and they can't understand how to stop it. She had a normal D-dimer, so the hospital didn't do any scanners of lungs. I'm going back to that theme where the doctors don't know what's going on, so they can't assess it normally. It's not a normal type of illness. It's different. It's kind of like you should go back and watch Andromeda Strain or something like that. They can't quite figure it out. The doctors have to look at it in a novel way, which they're not doing. In general, and it's Michael Crichton. He actually wrote probably 2 books that type, and I think the other one was Coma, which was Michael Crichton book where they put people deliberately in comas and milk them for all their money. Michael Crichton was a doctor, by the way. He was an MD who went back into writing. So this is the COVID-19 vaccine injured and bereaved supporters UK BIB. Number 2, what a real inquiry into the response to COVID would look like. That's Michael P. Singer. And I think I think his name is Rainer Fulmish in the EU kind of did something like that. I mean, with no teeth, just an assessment from a variety of different experts, but no ability to assess criminal penalties. I mean, there's just so much change. It's just incredible. I mean, this guy goes through, like, I think 50 points, which I can go through. I mean, I can read some. There's a lot of questions to be had. I can read this. Conclusions like these are insulting to the public's intelligence, as with the response to COVID itself. The response to COVID led to the sharpest economic collapse since the Great Depression, global famine, mental health crisis, runaway inflation, a transfer of over $3 trillion from the world's poorest to the very richest, the premature deaths of hundreds of thousands of young people, and the worst education crisis since the Second World War. Given the magnitude of the harm that's been done, the public deserves to know exactly who knew and did what, when, and why in the days leading up to the lockdowns in the spring of 2020 and beyond. Though it may not be politically feasible, ideally this would one day take the form of an international tribunal. Below are just some of the many disturbing questions to which any leader who claims to represent the public ought to demand answers. 1. Why did the CDC suddenly adopt, quote, measures to increase social distance, unquote, as official policy in 2004, contrary to all the epidemiological guidance it had developed through the 20th century? 2, who was behind the campaign to export the concept of lockdown to Liberia and Sierra Leone in 2014? 3, some intelligence reports have indicated that members of the Western national security community were aware of a new virus that emerged in China by the fall of 2019. What was being said about the virus at that time? 4. If some national security officials have been worrying about a new virus in China since the fall of 2019, how could they have possibly believed China's 2-month lockdown of Wuhan eliminated the virus several months later? 5. By January 2020, tips began to emerge that the World Health Organization was planning to recreate China's lockdown across the world. When and on what basis did the World Health Organization make the decision? 6. Lockdowns have been ruled out by the pandemic plans of the WHO and every developed nations. Why weren't these pandemic plans followed? 7. Why were health security officials talking about, quote, curfews of indefinite duration by February 24th, 2020? 8. Why does the WHO's February 2020 report rely on logical fallacies in the promulgation of China's lockdown measures as global policy? 9. Why was the current director of national intelligence sitting next to China's CDC director at the event 201 simulation of a coronavirus pandemic in October 2019, shortly before a real coronavirus pandemic emerged? That's a good question. 10. Former White House coronavirus response coordinator Deborah Birx has made conflicting statements about how she got her job. For example, the former deputy national security advisor offered her a job in the White House's public health security advisor as far back as November 2019. How was Birx chosen for this role? Good question. She's changed her story too. She's just a total monster. These are monsters. 11. I mean, I can go through 50, but really good article. A lot of questions. A lot of questions still need to be answered. A lot of us were in kind of a state of like, just do what we're told. I was doing it too. I mean, I went through the lockdowns and all that stuff as well. So, but yeah, really good. This is Sadiq Khan getting his boost. This is like yesterday. And then the guy responds, be like, hope you didn't get the saline version, you nut. Actually, much worse than that, but he's still promoting it. Sadiq Khan. 943 days ago was a long ASS time. If COVID was so deadly, you'd be done. And this is Roos. This is the guy that I put out. This is Weber Shandwick, provides PR for Moderna and Pfizer. So this is kind of another element of how much they're spending on ads. 50 million contract for a PR firm. So it's not just business consultants. They got the full suite of like corporate servitors like to go out and try to figure out the best response. So this is Weber Shandwick provides PR. I repeated that. $50 million contract. PR firm to be embedded at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta as part of the Division of Viral Diseases team. Wow. That's Paul D. Thacker. These are all Substack. It seems Substack seems to be an uncensored environment. And then this is like somebody who's like very sick. And there's another movie out, Long COVID, a Parallel Pandemic. I'll try to watch through that. This is the government. This is a Judicial Watch document. They got 27 pages. This is yesterday, October 11th, 2022. And their goal was to place a trusted messenger on the Joe Rogan Show and Barstool Sports to promote vaccination. Work with outside expert to identify who will be most effective. So they're targeting the alternate media. I mean, Joe Rogan has listeners that are bigger than the entire corporate media on one of his shows. So I don't know who's the alternate anymore. I mean, it's just the old decaying lie factory as opposed to people asking questions. The media maybe is better. It's a better analysis. The expose, October 1st. 163 children dead, 1,200 disabled, 15,000 hospitalized. According to the CDC, according to those documents. Piers Morgan's walking it back. He was one of the hardest, pro-vaccination people. But they're all backtracking and changing their stories. This guy says, even at the time he's advocating that the unvaccinated should be shut out of everyday activities, there's very little firm evidence of higher infection transmission rates among the unvaccinated. But yeah, they're all walking it back and changing their stories. This is something I mentioned before, Ladapo under attack. First, FDA, CDC, NIH, Moderna, and Pfizer officials told me secretly and on anonymity while I was Trump's pandemic advisor at HHS that in about 5 or 6 years, vax deaths will surge. That's Paul Alexander. So he was Trump's pandemic advisor at HHS. That's where that guy's from. I don't think he's there anymore. So, yeah, these attacks on Ledopo is pretty interesting. So, I mean, it's the same attack thing. They all attacked. There's something in there. It's something in there, kind of like attack strategies to constantly attack alternate ideas and just have one result. They always forced vaccines instead of therapies or health decisions, but everything was pushed to the vaccine, which is very telling. This is Paul Alexander again. This is HHS under Trump. Doctors in America and Canada are coming to us silently, scared, telling us yes, they were denied to try treatments off-label, and they were offered and given fake vaccine cards by hospitals from March 2021 so that they would not be laid off due to mandates. So hospital CEOs would give them fake cards, and some told us they took it for they would not take the shot. Some refused the shot and card. So a lot of these things will come up. Yeah, fraud is a fraud in contracts. I think I talked about that last time. There's definitely clauses about fraud in their own contracts, and it's going to be a big issue. These lawsuits are coming. There's going to be huge lawsuits. There's billions of dollars at stake. All the big firms are going to get involved in it. So, for and against. It's going to be a cash cow for lawyers. Just like the tobacco litigation. Even the defense lawyers, they all got paid too. I was actually, and probably the same thing will happen. I did some work while I was in law school for one of the defenders of the tobacco suits who said that tobacco does not cause cancer. It's obviously baloney. But you had to go through 2 levels of security. They had outside third-party heavy security, and you had to go through 2, like imagine going through 2 airport checkpoints to get back and see these documents. That's what you had to do. It's incredible. Rome, teacher 44 has heart attack in classroom, dies. These are like catastrophic deaths too. These aren't people who waste away. They just go down. And this is CDC covering up still. CDC will not release review of post-vaccination heart inflammation. So I think this was just yesterday. So there's not giving out the information that came out, the 2 things, the Pfizer documents and the V something that came out. So, Walensky stuff just came out due to lawsuits. The lawsuits for the judges forced them to put it out. And these are just stories of people who got sick. I want an explanation as to why I have a damaged heart from a safe and effective vaccine, why we were lied to, why the problem isn't on the mainstream news, why are we ignored? Because the news is getting paid by the same people. Unfortunately, because you trusted your government, sadly, yes, more so because everyone else trusted them and I felt pressured into it. Behavioral science, baby. Learn it now. Because they're going to keep applying it, probably always, 9/11, everything. They've been applying it, actually. Man paralyzed by AstraZeneca tells his story. This is all the child deaths, so these are the child killers. This is mortifying. We see nothing of this on the mainstream garbage. October 10th, 2022. You just see it going on. This is October 7th, 2022, Canada. You just show the kids dying. 51 a day, 57, 59, 62. Do the math, do it up. Whole family's lost. Generation lost. It's not going to be a Generation Z, Generation X. Generation lost. Consequences, I hope you realize the consequences are going to ripple out like a 9.0 earthquake once people kind of shake the stupidity out of their brains. This guy makes a great point. The only thing that's safe and effective at this point is the removal of corrupt politicians and deceptive media. Yep. Peter Halligan, Guy who came up with the 20 million number. C19 injections, informed consent via government mandate compulsion in the doctor-patient relationship, a tale of two states. One uses informed consent between doctor and patient, the other government mandated treatment. I would use the word forced, but there's Piers Morgan again. People who refuse to get jabbed and whine about lockdowns really are a special breed of stupid, selfish jerks. Another dead 29-year-old. I don't know why those are in there. This is from Blaze Media. Pfizer executive admits COVID-19 vaccine was never tested to prevent transmission. This is scandalous. Dear doctor, saying at least you live while discussing your long COVID battle with this insidious illness is not only unhelpful, but dismissive of the massive suffering and destruction of who we were. This isn't living, it's existing. Like I've said this before in one of my earlier talks. We're at 6 right now, but it's like these people are in between life and death. They're not. They're in some kind of some middle state. Piers Morgan again. Love the idea of COVID vaccine passports for everyone. Flights, restaurants, clubs, football, gyms, shops, etc. It's time COVID-denying anti-vaxxer loonies had their BS bluff called and bar themselves from going anywhere their responsible citizens go. Yeah, this guy's just another monster. You can go watch his interview with Damien Eccles, too. It's a total joke. Kanye put this out. George Soros and Klaus Schwab are your enemies, not China and Russia. And then deleted it. That was October 9th. Paul Alexander today. Twitter, Dr. Latipo DeSantis' Surgeon General, says it's criminal what Twitter and big tech does, and I agree 100%. Crushing dissent. Can't spell it. Voices that question the false COVID policies and no narrative. Another one. If the government will blatantly lie for us to conform to their demands, where does it stop? What are they currently lying to us about? This is a guy who's changing his mind with new information. So it turns out get vaccinated to save other people was a farce. I think I owe a lot of people an apology. I generally thought I could trust the experts. I'm very disappointed to have been hoodwinked by the propaganda of 2020. This is a guy who died. This is died October 10th, 2022. He was on his 4th shot. 4 shots a doozy. This is Jab Injuries Australia. You can check these out. These are people doing a huge favor to society by going into detail their health journey, which is a nightmare. There's so many stories on there. It's thousands. Just people, just lives ruined. You always have Reuters fact check on your side. It's such a joke. October 12th. Confusion continues to spread online over the impact of COVID-19 blanket shots can have on transmission. Weird. Trust us. We can figure it out. We delved into what was known in November 2021. CR explainer. Some piece of garbage from Reuters is the last person I would trust to explain anything to me. Yeah, this is bad. This won't last well. August 8th, 2022. COVID-19 shots are effective at preventing serious illness and death. The other thing is the fact. I have a hard time looking at this woman's face. She's a total evil monster, child killer. Paul Alexander today, October 12th, 2022. Excess mortality rate across European nations is hugely elevated. You see the European nations with highest vaccination rates have the highest mortality rate. Wow, what a coincidence. Why is the CDC, FDA, and NIH avoiding this? Corrupt. I mentioned this guy earlier. I kind of translated his talk. His name is Mislav Kolakusic, Kolakusic of the European Parliament. Says the purchase of 4.5 billion doses of the COVID-19 vaccine for 450 million EU residents is the biggest corruption scandal in the history of mankind. That's Borla, should be in jail. Cashes out 60% of the stock. Myalgic encephalomyelitis and chronic fatigue syndrome. So something is going on there. Farmers warrant cheap medicine killed 15 million with COVID and may now be bad for your bones. E. coli protein contaminated vaccines cause numerous autoimmune diseases, including type 1 diabetes. That's PNU. Arumgam. Stephen Hawking's ALS is most likely a vaccine-induced autoimmune disease. Wow, that's crazy. Leaked EU Pfizer agreement reveals cover-up of bacterial proteins, endotoxins, DNA, dsRNA, and other contaminants in up to 50% truncated, modified, recombined junk mRNA in the vaccine. Informed consent was impossible. This toxic soup should never have been injected into humans. That's October 9th. Yeah, ask your doctor. Ask your doctor for a shot that's tested on 8 mice with bacterial proteins, endotoxins, DNA, dsRNA, and other contaminants in up to 50% truncated, modified, and recombined junk mRNA is good for you. It's so crazy. This is so crazy. It's actually hard to believe. It's hard to believe they got away with all this. I wouldn't even call them vaccines. It's not even the right word. They're shots. And there's more stories. I can go into detail of all these stories, but do you guys have any questions or anything? I mean, a lot of the fraud vitiates contracts, agreements if somebody defrauds you. So there's a lot of these contracts, provisions in the contracts won't stand up in a court of law, in a non-corrupt court of law. So a lot of those things, if you don't disclose certain elements and you people believe certain things, if there's deception, fraud, a lot of those people are going to be in trouble. Corporate bail will be rent, will be sued personally. Lots of problems. They're all in trouble. They're all in deep trouble. My show notes will be at the bottom. Like I'll put all you have to do is scroll down and click on the show on either Rockfin. I'm taking this off of YouTube, on either Rockfin or whatever, Spotify, iTunes. I don't know where people podcast addict. I don't know where you get your podcast or my podcast, but show notes are just scrolling on all the notes on any podcast. It shouldn't be that hard to. They're just in trouble from legal entities, from civil suits, and possibly criminal suits from just an average citizen. I mean, there's angry people out there. There's already suits about remdesivir, so you already have aggrieved parties in California suing, and there's other lawsuits on the way. Yeah, so Apple Podcasts, just scroll down and click on it. Yeah, they redefine the word vaccine. There's no question about it. It's really not a vaccine. I mean, a vaccine is supposed to prevent the thing. I know people have taken it. I know a lot of people have taken the shots and still got sick. Supposedly control the courts. We'll see. They didn't control the courts enough to keep the Pfizer documents they wanted sealed for 75 years out from Texas, and then they didn't control the courts enough to get Walensky's documents put out. So those are two instances where those are definitely not controlled. So I wouldn't go that general. I mean, these days the jurisdictions are so different; they're not uniform. So you get a different kind of taste of justice in different places. So some of these cases, like they're biased and things like that, you don't know. Like the whole, I went through the Depp Heard case, 2 different outcomes, 2 different jurisdictions is a great example. Depp Heard in England found that Johnny Depp was, he didn't succeed, and then you have one in Los Angeles, which is just like OJ. He has no idea the outcome. Like I didn't expect that. But, that depends on juror rationality and no corruption and things like that. So, anyway, that's number 6. I mean, that's 2 days later. I suspect there'll be more information. It's just coming out like a high-powered hose or something. It's hard to drink it up. There's a lot going on, but people are putting more and more things together and gathering more information. So stay safe. God bless.